I'd like to begin by reading the Gospel for the second week of Lent, coming from Matthew chapter 17. Jesus took Peter, James, and John his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with him. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, "Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell prostrate and were very much afraid. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise and do not be afraid." And when the disciples raised their eyes, they saw no one else but Jesus alone. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, "Do not tell the vision to anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This gospel reading from Matthew reminds me of a story that I'd heard many years ago while playing bunco, no less. Lisa boldly told us that she had seen Jesus in the checkout line of the grocery store. Now, as you can imagine, this is not the typical discussion for bunco. I remember putting the dice down and the 3 of us looking quizzically at her. She went on to explain how she met Jesus in the most surprising individual. You see, she had prejudged this young man and his friend, who were dressed questionably and appeared to be up to no good. She was uncomfortable with them so close to her, just behind her in line. Anxious to leave the store, she was told the price of her groceries and then realized she'd forgotten her wallet. Embarrassed and aware of the long line behind her, she didn't know what to do. As she pondered her options, this young man pulled out his wallet and offered to buy her groceries. Stunned by this generous offer, she tried to decline, yet he insisted. As she walked away with her groceries and a very grateful heart, she realized that this young man who she misjudged represented the pure light of Jesus. As if she heard God speak, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." That encounter certainly left its mark on Lisa and on me as well. I recently read a commentary on Pope Francis's reflection on the Transfiguration that I'd like to share with you. Pope Francis insists that we can experience the wonder of a personal encounter with Jesus, and it will transform our lives, filling us with a joy that we cannot help but share. This spoke to me of Lisa's experience encountering Jesus in wonder, how it transformed her and filled her with the joy that she had to share with others. In this gospel, the divine presence in Jesus is made known undeniably to these disciples. God revealed God's very self in this Jesus, the man who called them to follow him, taught them, challenged them, healed many, and just 6 days before had foretold of his upcoming crucifixion, death, and resurrection. With the appearance of Moses and Elijah, they encountered the main figures of their faith tradition, representing the law and the prophets, the divine word itself. And yet Jesus stood with them, as the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. Is it any wonder that Peter tried to stop time, getting lost in the moment, wanting to build a tent for all three and show them their due honor? Like Peter, we'd all like to stay in these places of comfort on our mountaintops when all is right with our world. Yet, like Peter, James, and John, we have to come down from these experiences and continue on our journeys into the unknown with the faith that this Christ in all of his glory will be there to accompany us. God calls each of us to more, to continue growing, changing, transforming ourselves, to be more like this divine Son as we walk the path of our lives, uncertain what the future holds. Sunday's readings all speak of this call. Like Abram, who left his homeland and all that he loved at the age of 75, when he went obediently as the Lord directed him, leading his people toward the promised land. St. Paul's letter to Timothy calls each of us to bear your share of hardship for the gospel with the strength that comes from God, and that he saved us and calls us to a holy life by his own design, much like Abram following God's design and not his own. The Transfiguration, this God revealing God's self to the disciples just prior to their journey to Calvary, is the perfect example of how we are given the strength we need to bear our hardship. We are able to get through anything if we look to Jesus for our strength. I recently read a newspaper story of a young man whose mother was killed, and yet he's able to stay positive about the blessings he has in his life. His mother was a woman of great faith and optimism, and she instilled these values in this young man, who in turn desires to pass this faith, love, and strength on to his own small children. What grace! When we bear our share of hardship for the gospel, we are not saying that we're delighted to have these burdens. We are, in fact, trusting in Jesus' ultimate message of the Paschal mystery. New life will indeed come from all of the dyings in our lives, however big or small they may be. We are called to trust, like Peter, James, and John, that the light and life of Christ will prevail over any darkness we face. Certainly, we don't have to bear our hardships alone. Recall that as they lay prostrate in fear, Jesus touches them and instructs them, "Rise, get up, and do not be afraid." At the times in our own lives when we fall down in despair and feel we cannot get up, Jesus is there for us, helping us to carry our crosses. He's there to touch each one of us, providing his love and guidance through the people and situations we go through, with the message that we need not fear. He will get us through, and new life will come. Recall that Pope Francis says we can experience the wonder of a personal encounter with the risen Lord. It will fill our hearts with joy, and that we will have to share it with others. This is not meant for some. This luminous, heavenly light of Christ is there for each one of us. I know this to be true. As a spiritual director, I experience this light in each person as they walk their journey and marvel at how God continues to shape them and transform their lives. I've heard stories like Lisa's time and again. We need to stay awake and notice this light of Christ in our lives, to marvel at this presence, to live out of this light and to say thank you, God. Who knows, maybe someday another person will say, I met Jesus today, after the heavenly light of Jesus shines through us.